The accusations against Morris inspired legislation at the Texas state capitol, a bill banning deals preventing sexual abuse victims.
A woman has come forward accusing the pastor of a North Texas megachurch of sexual abuse.
Former Gateway Church pastor Robert Morris has pleaded guilty to 5 child sex abuse charges, bringing one of the country's most closely watched church abuse cases to a major turning point. Under a plea agreement, he will spend 6 months in an Oklahoma jail, serve 10 years of probation, register as a sex offender for life, and pay restitution to Cindy Clemisher. But while today's guilty plea closes the criminal case, it leaves behind even bigger questions about what church leaders knew, why the allegations surfaced decades later, and why multiple civil lawsuits are only now moving forward. The guilty plea centered on 5 criminal counts involving lewd or indecent acts with a child. According to the plea agreement, Robert Morris admitted guilt to those charges in an Oklahoma court, bringing the criminal proceedings to an end without a trial. The agreement set out the sentence in detail: 10 years of supervised probation with the first 6 months to be served in an Oklahoma jail. In addition to jail time and probation, the court ordered Morris to register as a sex offender for life. That requirement carries ongoing legal obligations beyond the completion of his jail sentence. The court also ordered him to pay $270,000 in restitution to Cindy Clemisher. The criminal charges followed an investigation that began after Clemisher publicly alleged that Morris had sexually abused her beginning in the 1980s when she was 12 years old. Prosecutors later filed 5 felony counts based on those allegations. Rather than proceeding to a full trial, the case concluded with Morris's guilty plea. After the hearing, one of Morris's defense attorneys said the former pastor entered the plea because he wanted to accept responsibility for his conduct and spare Clemisher and her family from continuing legal proceedings. The attorney also read a statement on Morris's behalf, saying he sincerely apologized for his actions and asked Clemisher and her family for forgiveness. Although the criminal sentence has now been handed down, it does not end every legal issue surrounding the case. The courtroom decision resolved the criminal charges, but it also shifts attention to how the allegations first came to light and why they surfaced decades after the abuse was alleged to have occurred. To understand why this guilty plea drew national attention, it helps to look at how the case unfolded over time. According to court filings and public statements, Cindy Clemisher has said the abuse began in the 1980s when she was 12 years old and continued over several years. At the time, Robert Morris was in his early 20s and involved in ministry. Decades passed before the allegations became public, turning what had long been a private matter into a criminal investigation. For many years, Morris publicly acknowledged what he described as a past incident of sexual misconduct that had taken place early in his ministry. However, the public explanation did not identify the alleged victim as a child. That became a major point of discussion after Clemisher came forward with her account. In June 2025, shortly after the allegations became public, Morris resigned as senior pastor of Gateway Church. The church announced that it accepted his resignation and later stated that it was committed to cooperating with the legal process while supporting those affected. Months later, Oklahoma prosecutors formally charged Morris with 5 counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child, leading to the guilty plea entered in court. The timeline also explains why the case has attracted attention far beyond one congregation. It involves allegations dating back more than 4 decades, one of the country's largest churches, and a criminal case that reached its conclusion only after years of silence. But for Cindy Clemisher, the guilty plea was more than a legal milestone. When she addressed the court, she described it as the beginning of a new chapter, one that transformed her public role from accuser to advocate. After the guilty plea was entered and the sentence was announced, Cindy Clemisher stood before the court and reflected on what the day meant to her. In a statement read after the hearing, she said, "Today is a new beginning for me, my family, and friends who have been by my side through this horrendous journey. "I leave this courtroom today not as a victim, but a survivor." Her statement marked the end of one legal chapter, but it also highlighted how her role has changed since she first came forward with her allegations. In the months leading up to the guilty plea, Clemashire became a public advocate for survivors of child sexual abuse, speaking openly about her experience and encouraging changes aimed at protecting future victims. One example came at the Texas Capitol, where she testified in support of legislation known as Today's Law. The measure was introduced to strengthen legal protections for child sexual abuse victims. State Representative Jeff Leach, who authored the bill, later responded to the guilty plea by saying the case showed why survivors deserve support, even when decades pass before they are able to seek justice. For many observers, the case has become about more than one criminal conviction. It has also raised broader conversations about how allegations are reported, how institutions respond when they surface, and how the legal system addresses abuse claims many years after they are alleged to have occurred. Even so, the courtroom was not the only place where this story continued. While the criminal proceedings have now ended, Morris also addressed the case through his attorney, offering a public apology and asking for forgiveness, a response that would become another key part of the day's developments. After the hearing concluded, one of Robert Morris's defense attorneys read a statement on his behalf. According to the attorney, Morris pleaded guilty because he wanted to accept responsibility for his conduct and provide finality to Cindy Clemashire and her family. The statement also said he sincerely apologized for his actions and asked for their forgiveness. The plea guilt meant the criminal case ended without a trial. Instead of presenting evidence before a jury, both sides reached a plea agreement that resolved the charges and established the sentence. That agreement included 6 months in an Oklahoma jail, 10 years of probation, lifetime registration as a sex offender, and restitution to the victim. Although the criminal proceedings have concluded, the plea does not resolve every issue connected to the case. A guilty plea determines criminal responsibility for the charges involved, but it does not automatically decide separate civil claims that are still pending in court. Those cases follow different legal standards and will be handled independently. The case has also renewed public discussion about how churches and other institutions respond when allegations of abuse are reported. While some questions have now been answered through the criminal justice system, others remain the subject of ongoing litigation rather than criminal prosecution. For Gateway Church, the guilty plea marks another significant moment in a period of major change. Once known primarily for its rapid growth and national influence, the church has spent the past 2 years responding to leadership changes, legal challenges, and increased public scrutiny following the allegations against its founder. But the story extends beyond one courtroom and one church. To understand why this case drew national attention, it's important to look at the influence Robert Morris built over decades and how quickly that public image changed after the allegations became public. Long before the criminal case reached an Oklahoma courtroom, Robert Morris was one of the best-known evangelical pastors in the United States. In 2000, he founded Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas. Over the next 2 decades, the church expanded into a multi-campus ministry with tens of thousands of weekly attendees, becoming one of the country's largest megachurches. Morris also reached a national audience through books, conferences, television broadcasts, and online sermons. That influence is one reason the guilty plea attracted widespread attention. The case involved not only a prominent pastor, but also a church that had become a major voice within American evangelical Christianity. As news of the allegations spread, churches, ministries, and Christian leaders across the country responded to the developments and followed the legal proceedings closely. After the allegations became public in 2025, Gateway Church announced that it had accepted Morris's resignation as senior pastor. Church leaders later said they were committed to cooperating with the legal process and caring for those affected. the church has also stated that it is working through a period of transition under new leadership. For many observers, the case raised broader questions about leadership accountability, institutional transparency, and how churches respond when serious allegations involve senior leaders. Those questions have extended beyond Gateway Church and prompted conversations across many faith communities. Even with the criminal case now concluded, several important legal matters remain unresolved. Those cases are expected to examine different questions from the ones answered in criminal court, and they could keep this story in the public eye well beyond today's guilty plea. Although the criminal case has now been resolved, Robert Morris remains involved in separate civil lawsuits that could continue for months or even years. Unlike the criminal proceedings, these cases are focused on civil claims and contractual disputes, not determining criminal guilt. One lawsuit was filed by Cindy Clemisher against Morris and several current or former Gateway Church elders. According to the complaint, she alleges that church leaders knew about the abuse years before it became public and failed to take appropriate action. Gateway Church and the individuals named in the lawsuit have denied those allegations. Those claims have not been decided in court, and the case is expected to move forward through the civil justice system. Morris is also involved in a separate lawsuit against Gateway Church. In that case, he argues that he is entitled to millions of dollars in retirement benefits under the terms of his employment agreement. Gateway Church disputes that claim, maintaining that Morris is not owed the compensation he is seeking. Court records show that a judge instructed both sides to attempt mediation before the case proceeds further. These civil cases involve different legal questions from the criminal prosecution. Instead of deciding whether crimes were committed, the courts will examine issues such as institutional responsibility, contractual obligations, and whether any civil damages are appropriate under the law. With the guilty plea now behind them, all attention shifts to those remaining court proceedings. They may not revisit the criminal conviction itself, but they could determine what legal and financial consequences still lie ahead and whether additional questions surrounding the case will be answered in open court. With Robert Morris's guilty plea now entered and his criminal sentence imposed, one chapter of this story has come to an end. The court has determined the criminal consequences: jail time, probation, lifetime sex offender registration, and restitution. But several important questions remain for the civil courts to address. Cindy Clemishire's lawsuit against Morris and current or former Gateway Church leaders is expected to move forward. That case will examine allegations about what church leaders knew and how they responded. Those allegations have been denied, and they have not yet been decided by a court. As the civil proceedings continue, both sides will have the opportunity to present evidence under a different legal process than the criminal case. At the same time, Morris's lawsuit against Gateway Church over retirement benefits remains unresolved. The outcome could determine whether he is entitled to compensation under his former employment agreement or whether the church's position will prevail. That dispute is separate from the criminal conviction and will be decided on its own legal merits. Beyond the courtroom, the case has already left a lasting mark on Gateway Church and on wider conversations about accountability, transparency, and the protection of children within religious organizations. For Cindy Clemishire, the guilty plea represented what she called a new beginning. For Gateway Church, it marked another step in a period of leadership transition and institutional change. The criminal case is now over. The civil cases are just beginning, and as those proceedings unfold, they may answer questions that today's guilty plea could not, ensuring that this story is not ending here, but entering its next chapter.